course, there is a great deal more in history than the drama of kings and queens. A lot of African peoples found it easy, and indeed better, to do without royal masters. Yet kingship clearly remained an important part of the story, and the facts of Africa's historical development reveal a wide variety of kingdoms and empires. Most of the old kingdoms have vanished long since, and all the old empires, but some of them have left behind, for us, magnificent reminders of their majesty and power. This astonishing sculpture in gleaming copper represents one of the rulers, or Oni, of the kingdom of Ife in western Nigeria 7 or 8 centuries ago. And yet when these superb sculptures first came to the attention of Europeans, only as recently as 1910, the experts at once pronounced that Africans could never have conceived or made them, and that some wandering European must have been the artist. Now the world knows better. The truth is that these are portraits of African kings made by African artists for use in royal ceremonial.
Throughout its history, the African continent has produced distinctive art forms. From the rock art of the San of the Kalahari and the Saharan Berbers, the throwing knives of the Congo, the wooden stools of the Ashanti, the masks of the Dogon. Hugely diverse and highly sophisticated art forms which have evolved over thousands of years.
Is very unique. The nostrils are emphasized, exaggerated. If you look at other artifacts from, say, Angola, Zimbabwe, or even Kenya, you find that Benin artwork stands out.
And he has some, it looks like, marks above his eyes. Are they eyebrows or are they tribal marks?
Yeah, they are tribal marks because, if you look at all the others, you find the 4 marks are, sort of common to all of them. So it's a royal mark. And the hairstyle, you find that again is very unique. Like straight plaits, it's more or less 6 layers. That would be the more or less the hairstyle of that very particular period. Looking at that, would you believe that that was made sort of 500 years ago? You would.
Exactly.
You can see it's almost like computer design. But that tells you the artistic quality of African artists at that time.
Despite its obvious beauty and complexity, it has been widely held in Europe that African art is in some way primitive. Many Europeans judged it purely on aesthetic grounds, rather than attempting to understand its social and cultural context. African art simply did not fit into the rigid and formal categories that dominated Western art theory. Yet, ironically, it was the profound values of African art which brought about a major change in a group of European artists at the beginning of the 20th century. Dr. Pogoson.
The artists were revolting at that time. They wanted to break away from the strict traditions of naturalism. The camera had come, and so they couldn't compete with it because it would give you direct images. And so there was a revolt among artists. They wanted to move on, and so people like Picasso started to break down human forms from what they were in the past, natural, into cubes, and that's how Cubism started. So it's a motivation from the African wood sculptures.
In 1907, the Spanish painter Pablo Picasso visited the Ethnographic Museum at the Palais du Trocadero in Paris, where he underwent a transforming experience.
When I went to the old Trocadero, it was disgusting. The smell. I was alone. I wanted to get away, but I didn't leave. I stayed. I understood that it was very important. Something was happening to me, right? The masks weren't just like any other pieces of sculpture. Not at all. They were magic things. I understood what the Negroes used their sculptures for. They were weapons, to help people avoid coming under the influence of spirits again, to help them become independent.
Picasso described African art as a form of magic, a mediator between this strange, hostile world and us. One significance of this recognition was that artifacts from the continent were no longer to be judged in the court of Western art. They could continue to speak for themselves, as they had spoken to Africans for generations.
So I'm just asking people here, like tourists as well, and anybody, what country you're from, and what you think about the artifact, and what you think it tells you about.
From Barbados. But the artwork in here, the first thing that strikes you is the fact that we've looked at the Greeks, we've looked at the Romans, and then in here we see items that surpass the ability. I mean, the bronze work over there, you're still in awe of it, and you're wondering how on earth they managed to do it. And yet, we've always heard, I mean, the reason why we're here, because my 8-year-old is being taught about the Romans, the Vikings, the Saxons. But here, we see work that surpasses all of those eras. I'm amazed.
The art of Africa by itself is extremely important to the world. So by studying these works, you're learning more about the continent full of this cultural richness and diversity, the visual power, remarkable creativity, which of course we're now all witnessing in the museums.
Next week on the story